What do you see? How does this look? Well, I mean, based on some of the stuff that you've been working on, some of the things that we've been talking about, I mean, you come into this point right here, we're going to take a look at exactly where you're at once that front foot is down, it's not moving anymore, right at about that point. Stride-wise, how do you look? What do you think about where that lead leg is at?
Right?
This way?
Yeah.
It's not striking me that it's, I mean, it's not perfectly straight out, but I'm not usually that concerned with whether or not it's straight. It's where is it consistently landing. So if you're consistently in that same spot, that's okay. Taking a look at where your knee is at and where your lead leg is at relative to that lead foot, the position of it, close to being vertical over that lead foot, close enough at this point, and the knee's facing forward, which is going to make it easier for you to clear your hips all the way through. When that knee is closed off, that lead foot is closed off, it makes it more likely that your hips won't rotate all the way through, they'll lock out, and that's going to stop you from being able to progress forward toward the target. It looks like your hips are rotating ahead of your shoulders, which is good, so you've got some hip rotation happening here. That back foot has started to turn too, which is an indicator that that back hip has started to fire. And we take a look at where your upper body is at. Your shoulders are still relatively closed. You definitely have twist or separation between your upper body and your lower body. But we do see that your throwing hand is peeking out just a little bit on the, I shouldn't use blue, it's hard to see, just barely right there on the third base side of your body. So you're starting to rotate and deliver a little bit before that front foot's down. Lead elbows popped out just a bit, which isn't necessarily the end of the world, but overall it's not bad. The only thing I see right here that I go, let's kind of monitor is, are you starting to deliver before that front foot is down? If so, tends to cost you a little bit in terms of velocity and might be an indicator that your weight's coming forward before your front foot lands on the ground. Let's see what happens as you rotate from there. Okay, let's take a look at how much displacement you get. Oops. Not bad. Okay, 70, we're looking for 75 as being ideal. Staying inside that 75-degree window is what we're hoping for. The closer you can get to staying inside that, generally the better command you have. Just makes it that much more difficult to manage your release point when you're getting outside that 15-degree displacement mark, okay? So relatively close. What do you see here in terms of the position of your arm, other than your head, your leg, all of that kind of stuff? Okay. Well, now you guys were talking about, you said that Coach Eager had mentioned to you about the lead leg.
Yeah.
Okay. So your perception of what he meant with that lead leg was what? That you were
collapsing on it.
Okay. So collapsing on that lead leg could mean one of a couple of things. It could mean that as you're rotating to throw, we'll look at this from the side view, that your lead leg or your lead knee is bending more, and your weight is kind of folding into that knee. So your knee would be sliding forward as your weight is shifting forward. You're bending on it more. It could also mean that that knee is shifting from being vertical over that lead foot to giving and swinging. See how it slips and slides a little bit over to that first base side? Okay, so that movement in that lead knee is an absorption of some of the power that you would otherwise have that's being directed toward the target. Ideally, we want that lead knee to stabilize. We want your lead foot, your lead knee to not move as you're rotating to throw, as you're shifting your weight and rotating to throw. The more stable they are, the better ability you have to drive force into that lead leg, and that's what you're going to utilize to speed up your arm. Okay, so it could mean that that lead knee is giving a little bit toward that first base side. okay? And it also could simply mean that you're just taking, instead of your body out past the lead leg, you're just folding at the waist down into that lead knee, which oftentimes is a product of trying to get the arm on top and work on a downhill plane, which you have a tendency sometimes to do. What he's talking about likely, and definitely is what I'm talking about, is getting your body to travel from back to front, from once that front foot lands on the ground, we want you shifting and moving forward past that lead leg. And as you move past that lead leg, let me just do this. I'll pull up a side view with it. So from where you're at when you land, when that front foot is down, you want to be moving toward the target rather than down into that lead leg. Okay? Okay. The other thing that we talk about is creating a balance of rotation, your shoulders, your whole body rotating from closed to open, together with a shift of weight from back to front. So you want to derive power both from your weight coming from loaded over the back leg to shifting and moving out over the front leg, together with the closed to open rotation of your shoulders. The better you can balance those two sources of power, generally the faster you throw, and the better command that you've got. You are a guy that tends to be linear shift dominant and wants to work vertical. Now your shoulders rotate, but that gets kind of downplayed quite a bit within your delivery because your emphasis is the arm gets up and the arm comes back down. It's also why when you miss, you tend to miss more high and low, because that's working on plane with the path that your arm is traveling on. So what we want to try to be able to do is minimize that tendency, and minimize that tendency under any conditions or circumstance you're in. And it's all about the direction that your body is traveling. If we can get it to move more back to front and less top to bottom, I know that's what I'm looking for. I know that's what our guys, and I'm pretty certain that that's what Coach Eager's talking about as well. That's what he's seeing is that flex or that collapse or that drop in your body driving from high to low into that lead leg, which just makes it that much more difficult for you to command the ball. Does that make sense? Okay. We focus on it in a couple of different ways. I mean, partly it's the path that you take with your arm, your elbow in particular, as you're rotating to throw. The more you take that elbow upward, the more you have to work back downward to counter or compensate the fact that you were going up and then you're coming back down. So the more we can get that to travel from back to front, your elbow, the easier it is for your body to continue to travel back to front. The easier it is for your lead knee and lead leg to stabilize, because instead of everything driving down into it, it's traveling up past it. And you use the slope of the mound to be able to create the downward plane on the pitch. That's all you need. You don't need to manufacture downward plane when you're pitching downhill on a mound. We don't need to have to try. We're going to go back to front, down the slope of the mound, and that will get the ball to travel toward the bottom of the zone. We're really just trying to simplify it as much as we possibly can. Make your movement pattern direct the ball toward the bottom end of the strike zone by default. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's keep looking at this one as you rotate. The displacement that you get with your head, it just pushes you 5 degrees past that window that we're looking for, will easily shift back up inside that 15-degree window simply by traveling more back to front with the path of your arm. That's it. You know, we're having a conversation, I think this was last week, must have been, it was when the Royals were playing, and what's his name? Chris Young was pitching for the Royals. Did you see that at all? Okay. Chris Young is 6'10", almost 6'11". Okay, he's like right now, I think the tallest pitcher in the big leagues. He's never been a super hard throwing guy. He is an example of a guy that has an ability to create an unusual plane, and the major league announcers were talking about this when he was pitching. Because he's so tall, and because so much taller than the average pitcher, even at that level, that he can create a unique look through the downward angle and downward plane that he can throw the ball at that makes him remarkably effective with what otherwise would seem like substandard major league stuff. He's always been a guy that seems like he throws, 87 to 90, somewhere in there. A lot of times that's even on the souped up major league guy. Nothing really spectacular about any of the off-speed pitches he throws. But he's been in the big leagues for a long time and been very effective. Now, he's been able to utilize his ability to create this unique look and creating a steeper downward angle to his advantage because it's unusual for the hitters. Even at the height that you're at right now, you're not enough above what the average height is for a pitcher, maybe a little above for high school right now, but where you're ultimately going to where that angle that you're creating by trying to get your arm up higher is outside the norm of what hitters normally see. Okay. That being the case, there's no advantage to it. There's no advantage to the idea of getting more on top and trying to create a steeper angle. The run over which you have to throw the ball is too long for that little extra couple of inches to make any kind of a difference perception-wise for the hitter. It's just simple geometry over that distance. So, but conversely, the cost to your delivery in terms of velocity and command is not anywhere close to worth, well, no gain, realistically, in terms of creating that downward plane. Too much loss of velocity, too much loss of command. Those are things, obviously, we want to be able to capture and hang on to. Okay? So, my point with all of this is continuing to make sure that your body's in position when your front foot lands, which it's darn close to being, into ideal position when you land, to be able to work back to front, to not emphasize going down. I mean, this is really, really solid position that you're in right here on the right from this side view. Your weight's not forward. You've got a little bit of spine arch happening right there. Your spine angle is slightly tilted back. You're not overstriding. Right there. Your shoulders are closed. You're throwing hands above your elbow. Your lead foot's open. All of that is good. Let's take a look at your split angle. Okay, relatively wide split angle, which is great because you're managing it well with your body. And all that means is, I don't know if you remember back from when you first came in, the split angle is our measurability for your stride length. Instead of trying to figure out how many feet and inches your stride is, we just look at how far split your legs are. The wider your legs are split apart, the longer your stride is, relatively speaking. And it doesn't really matter. It's based on what is effective and what works for you. Well, 136 is beyond average or normal for a split angle, but with the position of your upper body, it works. And the longer stride you can have managing your body in a good position, the better off you are. Okay. So now it's just a matter of how effectively can you deliver your body and your mass from here on a direct path to the target. You were doing it in some of the reps when you were down here. You were managing your direction much better. When you would, not necessarily consciously, but when you would focus a little bit more on trying to locate after maybe you airmailed one, subconsciously and athletically, you put your body in a better position and have your head traveling more forward, and that's when you would hit your spots better. So the key becomes now is understanding it, being conscious and aware of it, and focusing on making it happen. So, and realizing when it's not, so you can make the adjustment to get back on track. The drills that you go through, all the exercises that we do in the classes that you do habitually, they need to be geared toward that thought process, going back to front. You can, and a lot of them really are, whether you're in the two-piece, whether you're in the jump back, the rolling torque in particular is a really good one for you to emphasize that forward shift. And even the figure eight is making sure that when you're going through that big lateral side-to-side rotation, that you're not driving that arm up. You're allowing your arm to work in parallel with your shoulders. And I think you're going to stand to gain more from that in terms of command, even than velocity, but I think you're going to gain some in velocity as well. How much, I have no idea. Maybe if nothing else, it just allows you to operate at a higher velocity for an extended period of time, which, great, fine, that's awesome, okay? I think what we'll see with a bit more of a back to front shift too will show up in terms of where your body is at when you finish. You know a lot right now, you end up spinning around that lead leg. That's because of the disproportionate top to bottom together with the lateral, with this rotation with your shoulders. Okay? We don't want to take any of the shoulder rotation away. We just want to replace some of that top to bottom path with your body with more of a back to front shift. Okay? Let's go to the side view again. Man, and that's what I also like as you're going through here is the loading portion of the delivery. So you are flexing, you're bending on that back knee, you're continuing to drop into that back leg, loading, creating that pressure into that back leg as you're striding out. You at no point pop up. You're continuing to work down into the ground. That's fantastic. This is really, really good position to be in. Now it's just directing it forward. That's all. So just line angle, how can you take your head when you're down? Release. Alright, so let's see what this looks like. Okay, 24 degrees down. Okay. See how wide this split is? We want to narrow that up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So your head stays higher, your hand stays lower, and instead of you having your body driving this way and your arm going this way, the wider they split out like this, the more power gets eaten up, gets absorbed. All right? The more they stay close together, and they're not going to stay, we're not turning you into, you know, Chris Sale from the right-hand side where you're throwing like this. But the closer we can get, the more narrow we can make that gap, I think you're going to definitely see an improvement in the command of your pitches, probably in consistent velocity, and I think it's probably going to benefit you most, really, well, not necessarily most, but certainly like with that changeup, commandability of that pitch. Because that pitch is going to have to develop. as much as it's not seeming that necessary now. At the college level, you're gonna have to have that pitch, and especially as a starter, you're gonna need that third pitch. Okay. All right. So. Let's just take a look and see when it puts down. Watch that front knee. Right there. Okay, it's not dramatic, but there's some flex. And again, ideally, you're going to keep that lead knee as close to the same position that it's in as possible. That's not a ton. And obviously, this is a single rep. There could be others where it's going to be more dramatic. But not so much right here where I think that that's the absolute cause for that tendency for you to be going down. Now, I'd started to say, too, I think one of the things that you'll notice, this is kind of a halfway example of it on this particular pitch, is where your body and your back leg finish. When you get a better forward path, you're going to end up finishing with that back leg most likely out here. So it's ahead of you, still going to be off to the first base side because you're going to get plenty of force happening from that rotation with your shoulders. But instead of it normally spinning all the way around and ending up even with or back behind that lead foot, you're going to have enough momentum carrying forward that it's going to end up causing you to get that back leg finishing out here in front a little bit more. Now, I don't want you to think about making that happen. That's a result. That's not a cause. Trying to get your back foot to finish out there as a cause to help your delivery, I don't think is going to help you at all. But when you focus on that forward shift, if it went pretty well, you'll probably notice that that's where your foot ends up. Okay. All right, let's look real quick at the off speeds. Yeah, that's fastball, that's fastball, that's curve, let's change. Okay, let's take a look. Setting fastball. Okay, so fairly sizable difference in terms of the timing of release. You're later on the breaking ball, which just is, it says it's more of the pace that you're going at. Okay, so when your off-speed pitch gets released earlier than your fastball, it has to do with the range and the load. It means you're shortening up your range and you're shortening up your load on the off-speed pitch. When your off-speed pitch comes out after your fastball, it's generally your tempo. So your pace of everything that you're doing is slower than what you're doing on your fastball. Let's just take a quick look at position. Position-wise, you're in pretty good shape. So not a big difference between fastball slot, changeup, or curveball slot. So it's definitely going to have more to do with tempo. Your release point, your ability to command your release point is definitely affected by variations in your tempo off of what your fastball is, as well as the range. The more we can keep those consistent from one pitch to the next, the easier it is for you to be able to command them. Okay. All right, let's look quickly at the changeup. See what that one's like. Okay, much less difference between both of these. Let's just look at. Okay, a little bit of a difference. Realistically, your delivery is better on the change up here than it was on the fast play. So yeah, your head's steadier. Some of that may be that you just backed off in intensity. A lot of times what happens is the harder you try to go to throw the ball, the more likely you are to displace off to the side. But regardless, we're going to want to continue to put in, and I think really, especially right now, because other than the other day when you just didn't have a feel for anything, which could be, you know, a number of factors. Probably just one of those days more than anything else. It's a good opportunity right now to put in extra work on your changeup. Your fastball's been fairly good, your curveball's been good, then disproportionate amount of work on the changeup right now, developmentally. Just throw it in games. You're going to have to give yourself a chance to get some feedback. Even when maybe it's not the right pitch to throw in that circumstance, just working on it. And I know one thing, you're not going to hear any guff from EJ about you working on your changeup, because all I hear about from EJ is all our guys need to work on their changeups. We need more work on the changeup. So it's a golden opportunity to be able to go to work on that. And demonstrating an improvement in that pitch and working on that pitch is going to do nothing but serve you well in the short term and the long term. Okay. All right. So summarizing kind of what we're after is I always feel like, especially now with the opportunity for you to get in and get to work in the classes and such, that the big thing that we can gain value-wise when you do come in here and we sit down and we take a look at what's going on video is to make sure that you are clear in your mind as to what you need to focus your attention on. When you come in to get the work that you're going to get in the classes, that you know what your objective is. Gives us an opportunity for me to sit down and talk with Nick, with AJ, with Will, with Kevin, any of the other guys that are here, and say, this is the latest, this is what we saw. Whenever we do these videos, we share them with the whole staff too, so the rest of the staff sees what's going on. They give their 2 cents and their input as well, so that everybody knows and is on the same page with what you're working on. Back to front, you're in great position when you land. Focus on working back to front, not top to bottom. Taking your head and your upper body forward and planing out a little bit more the direction your arm is going. So rather than the elbow going up, the arm and elbow are coming more forward. We're going to try to narrow the gap, like we showed on the video, between where your hand and your head end up from where they start. So where they're at when you land is relatively close in height. The more they spread out, the worse off you are. The more narrow that gap is, the better off you're going to be. Okay? So utilize drills, reps, everything you're doing mechanically to focus on that. Now, when it's time to work on other stuff besides just pure mechanics, then you focus on that. But in your drill work, in all your flat ground stuff, and even some of the stuff you do on the mountain, that's your point of focus. Make sense? Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Real quick, because I share it with everybody, and it probably won't